The first time Mom sent us to Uncle Ronnie's house for the summer, it felt like a punishment. In a way it was. At 13, my sister Layla and I were inseparable in mischief. That year, I'd pushed my luck too far, using Mom's credit card to buy a video game. She was furious, and our sentence was clear. 2 months in Grover's Peak, a sleepy seaside town with nothing to offer but my uncle's history books and dusty gift shop. Uncle Ronnie lived a simple life. He didn't have a TV, no internet, no video games, only piles of old books about wars, ancient civilizations, and shipwrecks. Layla and I were bored out of our minds within hours. Grover's Peak was beautiful but felt isolated, especially for kids who had grown up with city distractions. One hot afternoon, I was staring out the window when a loud crack startled me. A ball hit the glass, and hiding behind a tree was a boy, dark-haired and wide-eyed with panic. It was my first glimpse of Seven. That's his real name. I thought it was odd but cool. After a quick exchange, I followed him back to his house, where I discovered a treasure trove of cable TV, comics, and snacks. That day changed everything. Layla was already there, playing with his sister, and soon we had a group of friends. Seven, Layla, his sister, and a few other local kids formed a little gang, and that summer became one of adventure and discovery. We spent our days on the beach, swimming in the ocean, building sandcastles and goofing off. At night, we'd sit under the stars, talking and laughing like nothing else mattered. By the end of that summer, I didn't want to leave. I begged Mom to let us return the next year. Thankfully, Uncle Ronnie seemed to enjoy our company. Looking back, I think he was lonely, and having us around brought life to his quiet little world. That first summer was magical, but it was only the beginning. The second summer at Grover's Peak felt different from the start. At 14, I wasn't just excited to be back at the beach or hang out with Layla. I was counting down the days to see Seven again. There was something about him that stuck with me all year, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it then. The moment we arrived, I barely said goodbye to Mom before running to find him. Seven was waiting at the gift shop, leaning against a shelf stacked with seashell trinkets, that familiar grin on his face. It felt like no time had passed. That summer, our friendship grew closer. We spent more time just the two of us, exploring the woods, swimming at hidden coves, and sneaking off to the old boulder we found the year before. Seven had this way of making even the quietest moments feel exciting. He had a sense of wonder I envied, always dreaming up wild stories about giants, wizards, or buried treasure. One evening, as we sat by the stream, our friends talked about first kisses. It seemed like everyone else had crossed that milestone, but I hadn't. When Seven confessed he hadn't either, I was surprised and relieved. He whispered to me, "Maybe we should find out what it's like." Before I could process what he meant, he leaned in and gave me a quick peck on the lip. It lasted barely a second, but my heart raced. He laughed it off and ran off to join the others, leaving me to sit there, stunned. We never spoke about that moment again, but it stayed with me. Something had shifted, though I wasn't sure what. By the time I was 15, the summers at Grover's Peak had become the highlight of my year. That year, Seven and I started having sleepovers, holding hands without thinking, and cuddling when we were tired from a long day of swimming or hiking. It felt natural, like an unspoken understanding between us. But that summer also brought a complication. Yvette. She was Seven's first girlfriend, and I hated everything about her. She was loud, rude, and condescending, always acting sweet when Seven was around but mean when he wasn't. I felt betrayed that he hadn't told me about her. One day, when I couldn't take it anymore, I stormed off to the forest. Seven found me like he always did. I tried to brush off his questions, but he pushed until I muttered something about Yvette being awful. To my surprise, he admitted he had broken up with her. "I realized I'd rather spend time with you," he said, intertwining our hands. My heart soared. When it was time to leave that year, it was harder than ever. I hugged him tightly, wishing I could stay forever. Before I left, he gave me his bracelet, a simple thing he wore every day. "Keep this," he said. "That way, I'll always be with you." I didn't take it off for the rest of the year. It became my most treasured possession, a physical reminder of our summers together. When I turned 16, everything changed again. Puberty hit me hard, and I realized I had no interest in girls. My friends at home were all dating and talking about crushes, but I could only think of Seven. I didn't know what that meant for me or how to handle it, especially in a time when being gay wasn't as widely accepted. That summer, Seven had changed too. He was taller, stronger, and carried himself differently. There was a tension between us that hadn't been there before, a lingering glance or a touch that felt charged. One day, as we explored the woods, he pulled me up onto our favorite boulder and took off his shirt. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help it. He caught me as I almost slipped off the rock, and suddenly we were face to face. Without thinking, we leaned in and kissed. This kiss was nothing like the one before. It was longer, deeper, and filled with emotions I didn't fully understand. When we pulled away, he smiled. "Our little secret," he said. I agreed, though I couldn't stop thinking about it. From then on, we stole moments together whenever we could. In front of others, we were just best friends, but in private, we explored the connection that had been building for years. We found our way back to that boulder often, nicknaming it our kissing pedestal. It became a symbol of what we shared, a secret world that belonged only to us. As the summer drew to a close, saying goodbye felt unbearable. Seven gave me one last hug, whispering that we'd see each other again soon. I clung to that promise, knowing it would carry me through another long year. By the time I was 17, it was impossible to deny the pull I felt toward Seven. Every summer we spent together deepened the connection we had, but this one felt different. There was a growing weight to our time, a realization that these summers wouldn't last forever. Uncle Ronnie had decided to sell the gift shop and move into a care home. His age and loneliness had finally caught up with him, and he admitted he couldn't keep up with the business anymore. Knowing it would be our last summer at Grover's Peak made everything feel bittersweet. The town, the beach, the woods, all of it had been a sanctuary, a world where Seven and I could just exist together. When we arrived, I barely unpacked before running to Seven's house. Seeing him felt like coming home, and slipping back into our routines was effortless. But beneath the surface, something was different. Every glance lingered, every touch carried more weight. It was as if the unspoken feelings between us were finally surfacing, demanding to be acknowledged. That summer, we grew even closer, sneaking moments whenever we could. Whether we were holding hands under the table or stealing kisses when no one was looking, being near him felt like the most natural thing in the world. But the closer we became, the harder it was to ignore the ticking clock of the summer's end. One night, during a game of truth or dare with our friends, my sister dared me to tie my hand to Seven's for the rest of the night. It was meant as a joke, but being physically tethered to him only reinforced how in sync we were. Moving together felt natural, as if we had been made to fit beside each other. Even after the bindings came off, I still felt that invisible thread connecting us, pulling me closer to him. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I realized we had stopped pretending. Our touches weren't casual anymore, and our time together had taken on a new intimacy. We hadn't officially defined what we were, but in my heart, I knew. He wasn't just my best friend, he was my everything. As our bond deepened, the urge to be honest about our relationship grew stronger. It was becoming harder to hide, not just from others but from ourselves. We weren't kids experimenting anymore. This was real, undeniable love. Toward the end of the summer, during a family dinner at Uncle Ronnie's house, Seven and I decided it was time. The thought of leaving Grover's Peak without telling our families the truth felt wrong. They deserved to know, and we deserved the freedom to be open. The announcement was nerve-wracking, and for a moment, the silence afterward felt suffocating. But then the questions started. Curious, concerned, and, to my surprise, accepting. Seven's mom hugged us both, and my mom looked at us with a mix of surprise and understanding. Even Uncle Ronnie, who I worried might disapprove, gave a quiet nod, and said he was glad I had found love. That night, I finally felt a sense of relief. The secret we had carried for so long was out in the open, and instead of rejection, we were met with warmth and support. It made me realize just how lucky we were, how much love surrounded us in our little world. With only a few days left of the summer, I clung to Seven as tightly as I could. We spent our final nights together, returning to our favorite spots: the beach at sunset, the quiet woods, and the boulder we had nicknamed our kissing pedestal. Those moments were filled with tenderness and longing, knowing that our time at Grover's Peak was coming to an end. Leaving Grover's Peak that final summer felt like the end of an era. Uncle Ronnie's house was packed up, the gift shop sold to a new owner, and the life we had built there faded into memories. I stood on the porch one last time, feeling the weight of the moment. Seven hugged me tightly before I left, and though we didn't say it out loud, we both knew things would never be the same again. But it wasn't the end for us. We had planned our future carefully. Both of us were going to the same college, and that gave me hope. When fall came, we moved into an off-campus apartment together. The idea of living in separate dorms felt unbearable, and we both knew we needed each other to navigate this new chapter of our lives. College brought its challenges: homesickness, late nights studying, and the occasional fight, but it also deepened our bond. We experienced everything together: the joy of making new friends, the stress of exams, and the simple comfort of cooking dinner after a long day. Our relationship grew stronger with every milestone, from our first real argument to our quiet, shared moments of understanding. Our friends at school often joked that we were like a married couple, and in many ways we were. Seven knew every part of me, the good, the bad, and the vulnerable, and loved me anyway. I felt the same about him. Looking back, I realized that summer at Grover's Peak, when I was 13 and thought I was being punished, had set my entire life in motion. It brought me to Seven, my twin flame, my best friend, and my first love. Even now, years later, I can still feel the pull of those summers: the smell of salt air, the sound of waves, and the warmth of his hand in mine. They're etched into my soul. That small seaside town may be behind us, but the love we found there will last forever.